All right, good afternoon and welcome to everyone. And thank you so much for joining us at our workshop today on setting up Ubuntu Reconciliation Food Gardens. My name is Jane Cherry from the Cooperative and Policy Alternative Centre, and we are an active partner in the South African Food Sovereignty Campaign and also the Climate Justice Charter movement. I will be facilitating this workshop today. First, I'm going to share the program with you. And I'm just pasting that in the chat for everyone to see. So we will kick off today's program with a brief input from Vishwas Satka, Copac's board chairperson, and he will provide some background to some of the work that we do, but also some of the context for this workshop and some history to the South African Food Sovereignty Campaign. After that, I will share some of the tools that we have developed for further viewing, which provide great tips and instructions for you as you embark on setting up your own food garden. And then just to mention that a lot is involved in setting up a food garden, and we can't squeeze it all into a 2-hour session. Ideally, we need a week, if not longer. But even still, we won't have been able to grasp everything. And so, since that's not possible to host a very long workshop, we have decided that we are just going to share some of the resources that we developed last year, and this is in the form of an online workshop series and some animations. And so I'll be sharing that in this session. And then another key tool that we've developed is our Food Commons map, which I'll also speak about in that session. And then the third session for today's program is a Q&A session with John Nzira, our expert permaculturalist and agroecologist. He will give a brief introduction to some of the work that he has done, and then we'll have a Q&A session with him. So if you have any questions throughout this workshop, any questions that you have on your mind at all about setting up a garden, please keep those in mind. Please write them in the chat, and we'll be sure to try and address all of those when we get there. And then just to let you know that this is a webinar setup. So unfortunately, it's not like a Zoom meeting where you can see who else is in the room. We have to use this setup. So we can allow you to speak if time permits, so you can raise your hand, but please also feel free to write in the chat. At the moment, there's 56 participants in this call. We did have about 270 register, so we are expecting quite a few more people to join. And then we'll end off the program with a brief closing by Vishwas. Okay, so that's it from me for now. Vish, over to you.
Thanks, Jane. I'm just going to share my screen. That's okay. Where is this? Okay. Can everybody see that? Jane, is that visible?
Yes, it is.
Okay, well, good afternoon to everybody. As Jane mentioned, I'm the chairperson of the board of the Cooperative and Policy Alternative Centre, which is one of the co-founders of the South African Food Sovereignty Campaign and the Climate Justice Charter movement. I'm just going to give some brief opening comments to kind of situate who we are, what we do, and so on. But just to also add, I'm an academic at Wits University as well. Now, in terms of what's happened in the country in July, it's been heartbreaking. And it basically, for us, at least in the food sovereignty space, didn't come as a surprise. I mean, despite the instigation of violence, certain forces in our society, the hunger issue did loom large. And we've seen it over the past 7 years of our campaign around food sovereignty and against hunger in South Africa. We also raised the alarm bell extremely loudly during COVID-19 around the hunger challenge in South Africa. And I think it's important to say a few things about, we are not a political party. We are not seeking to gain political mileage and build political capital of people suffering. We've been in the trenches. We've been along as informal traders, households, and communities for a long time. So we are not coming at this from the cold, if you like. So the South African Food Sovereignty Campaign comes out of a dialogue in 2014 recognizing across all provinces, all key sectors, the agrarian sector, food justice sector, activists fighting against price manipulation of bread. For example, bread is still a very important staple in South African society. Solidarity economy activists, environmental justice activists, recognizing the existing food system does not feed South Africa. Before we went into COVID-19, at least 14 million people in aggregate were going to bed hungry. When you look at it at a micro scale in communities, that number is much, much bigger. At the same time, we recognize it was important for us to now take the bull by the horns and advance an alternative to this corporate control, profit-making, globalized food system that doesn't care about our society. And so we decided to translate the idea of food sovereignty into the South African context. It's an idea that's championed by the largest planetary movement, La Via Campesina, with over 200 million members. Food sovereignty is about food justice. It's also about social justice and climate justice. We started off our campaigning work with the Hunger Tribunal in 2015 with the Human Rights Commission at Constitutional Hill and religious and faith-based communities to bear testimony to the crisis of hunger in our society. We had a bread march in Johannesburg. We've had drought speakouts. We've had food sovereignty festivals to develop tools and learn from each other and build a knowledge commons so that grassroots activists can build food sovereignty processes and pathways in their communities. We developed our own People's Food Sovereignty Act during the drought when our food system collapsed. We took that to Parliament as well, and we ignored. We also developed a climate justice charter in the midst of all this campaigning, because we recognized that it wasn't just the drought, it wasn't just a water crisis, it was actually a whole systemic crisis that we needed to address. Our intervention work during COVID-19, again, placed us at the front lines of what's been happening in the country. We put a lot of emphasis around supporting community-led food relief efforts and spotlighting them and giving them recognition and trying to leverage support from the state, from the Solidarity Fund and so on to help soup kitchens, community relief efforts and gardens and so on. And we were very, very clear that the state response was failing, and I'll say more about that. We also put a lot of emphasis on unlocking the food and water commons in our communities. Now, the state locked down South Africa with the assumption that most people shop at supermarkets, but actually 70% of poor households source their food from local food networks and alternatives. 70,000 small-scale fishers on our coastline feed their families and contribute to food in their communities. Informal traders are a very, very important artery and a supply source for locally produced food in communities and so on. And micro gardeners and micro farmers are at the heart of food hotspots in many, many communities, and they are suddenly shut down. And we demanded during lockdown that we must open the commons because this is where people source their food from. And we stood with informal traders, we stood with subsistence fishers and others to push this issue. We also confronted the profiteering of the supermarkets and reported them to the Minister of Trade and Industry and his Competition Commission. We went with the Pietermaritzburg Dignity and Justice Group to say there's a price squeeze, there's price gouging on food, and this is creating a problem for poorer people. We've also championed a basic income grant as crucial to the right to food in South Africa alongside food sovereignty. And we feel that more than most in progressive civil society, we've done technical work even around macroeconomic modeling of these alternatives, which we've shared with the Minister of Social Development, we've shared with the President as well, and have demanded that they take this alternative very, very seriously to cushion society. Of course, the debate is still ongoing, and it's a pity that despite what's happened in July, there isn't collective will and purpose of leadership coming from the state. We've also launched our climate justice charter in the midst of this. Our food relief mapping, we crowdsourced information from communities to find out how are people surviving in the midst of COVID-19 and the lockdowns that we've experienced. And what came through very, very is that the state failed both through the Solidarity Fund as well as the social development part in terms of its food parcel rollout. Many, many communities are displaying solidarity. We saw the solidarity during the drought. We saw the solidarity during COVID-19. And we also felt that in the context of the violence, the solidarity also came to the fore, must be strengthened. And it's clear that the local, whether it is resources, whether it's gardens, whether it's soup kitchens, was making all the difference in South Africa. And we made this point to the Solidarity Fund, and we made this point to the Social Development Department, letting them know that there are about 30 million people that are in food stress in South Africa, and that what they were doing is inadequate, and they needed to support these initiatives directly. We also championed the UBIG, as I mentioned. We brought the leading thinker in the world to kind of engage with us on this question and strengthen our case to society and the government. We worked very closely with water-stressed communities. We've been working with them throughout the drought, and we ended up working with 120 of them through a self-reporting tool. We took this to the Minister of Water Affairs, who was doing a band-aid approach to the water crisis, and emphasized the need for systemic transformation of our water infrastructure so that people can have their needs met. We are still in a legal dialogue with her, and now there's a new minister. We also emphasized the importance of the climate crisis hitting us alongside the COVID pandemic and the economic crisis. And we took the leading climate scientists' position paper to Parliament on October last year, together with our climate justice, emphasized that we are heating at twice the global average, and we are moving in a world of permanent catastrophe. They did not listen to us. But basically what we were arguing is that, with the lingering drought and with worse change, the basic building blocks of our society will collapse. Our food systems will collapse. And we saw that during the drought. The commercial agricultural system collapsed in South Africa. If we had COVID hit us 3-4 years ago, we would have had to import food aid into South Africa. And that is why we argued consistently that we need food system, and we even went so far as to develop our own People's Food Sovereignty Act as a compass. But no one listens to us in the state. No one in power listens to us. If they did listen, we would have been building a different kind of food system that would have helped us intersect in a much more positive way with COVID and the other crises hitting us. The Climate Justice Charter is our vision for a different kind of society. And these things for us are connected when we're thinking even about gardens. So basically our work since 2017 through the South African Food Sovereignty Campaign has been about building pathways in communities, villages, towns, and cities so that they can feed themselves. And as I said, it's about building on organic solidarities, positive solidarities amongst people. We saw that during the drought. We've seen it during COVID-19, and even now during the violence in July. And these pathways are about commoning. They're about sharing land, they're about sharing water resources, sharing biodiversity, our seeds, and other resources that we have. It's about building a solidarity economy in which communities and households and people have power. So these are the tools we've developed over the past 7 years of our campaigning, all freely available, developed by activists, small-scale farmers themselves, teaching all of us how to work with seeds, how to work with water, how to work with land, how to build food sovereignty, and so on. And Jane will be saying more about this. We've also done a lot of intellectual work around these alternatives, around the solidarity economy and so on. But essentially from 2017, many of our activists, and we are a space of convergence for activists. We're not about some hierarchical movement. We're really about building local leadership in local communities. And coming out of our activism over the past few years are various pathway building initiatives underway in the country. And in the midst of COVID-19, there was potential to scale all of this up. And of course, for us, at the heart of all of this is building food sovereignty hubs. And a hub, very simply, is a space where you can provide a backbone for building a pathway. You can have a seed bank, you can have equipment, you can do composting, you can show demonstration to households in a neighborhood, to communities, and so on. You can have a communal kitchen, and you can have infrastructure for community markets, etc. And essentially, this is a commons, a knowledge commons, a sharing commons, and so on. At Wits University, we have a pilot of a food sovereignty hub. We have our own building. We have a communal kitchen that hungry students run on their own. We've had a regular farmers market before COVID-19. It was a socialized market where farmers priced their goods before the market, And in the market, interacting with people, we're able to explain where the product comes from, how it's produced, what is the seeds they use, etc. So very different. And the prices were always cheaper. Markets that met the needs of farmers and markets that met the needs of the consumers. We have 6 agroecology gardens at Wits University, again demonstrating that we can build a food commons that can meet the needs of everybody. But this is one of many examples. So today, we want to work with you to contribute in one small way to what has happened during July, and to advance the idea of Ubuntu Gardens for Reconciliation. We all know that Ubuntu is about finding the deep humanity in all of us. And that's what we really need today. And we feel these Ubuntu gardens must say no to the racists amongst us that want us to engage in hatred, that want us to engage in race-based vigilanteism and so on. These gardens are saying no to all of that. We also want these gardens to affirm the Constitution, which is something that many, many people died for over decades to win. The Constitution is a very progressive basis for our social contract in South African society, and what some people want us to tear it apart. It's about the rule of law. It's about non-racialism and non-sexism, and we want these Ubuntu gardens to say this unequivocally and clearly, that this is what we stand for. This is what those who fought the struggle against apartheid died for. We also want the Ubuntu gardens to be an affirmation of a just peace. That means those that have engaged in vigilante violence and killings, whether in Phoenix or any other community or in any other place, they must be held accountable. There must be investigations, effective ones. There must be prosecutions. And we want the Human Rights Commission and the police to play their role. And these gardens must be saying that. We want a just peace. These gardens must also say we support what's happening in communities themselves. This is a modest contribution. If it happens in schools, if it happens in communities and so on, to say we want to support just peace and non-racial building in our communities. These gardens must also make the case for transformative economic policies to address inequality and exclusion. So in short, the objectives of today are to take a stand against race hatred. It's to support your efforts on wanting to build Ubuntu reconciliation gardens. It's to ensure zero hunger in schools, in villages, in communities, towns, and cities, because this was our rallying call for the past 7 years. And again, if they listened, if the powerful listened, we wouldn't have been in the situation that we are in. But we don't have to wait for the powerful. We must lead this process together. And of course, we want to strengthen food sovereignty campaigning. So we want you to share your gardening practices. We're hoping many of you have come here ready to set up your gardens, because we've sent out this call over 2 weeks ago. And we are using this platform to share knowledge, to give advice, to collaborate, and to strengthen pathways. We're hoping that this will be the beginning of an ongoing relationship. We'd like you all to embrace the South African Food Sovereignty Campaign, to log and register your garden in our Food Commons map, so that we can constantly work and support each other and build. I've been an activist for over 40 years. My first activist intervention was when I was 11 years old, and I led a school boycott in 1980. I didn't know what apartheid was, but it was incited by police surrounding my house and arresting my brother. And that struggle continues. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Vish, for that really great background and context for today's workshop. And thank you too for all the work that you have been doing to promote food sovereignty, but also to stand united against race hatred. So I've posted a link to the petition. If you haven't already signed it, please sign it. We really want to ensure that we get a lot of signatures. And then I'm going to also quickly paste the agenda for those of you who joined us a little bit later. So we're on to our second agenda item, which is tools for setting up your Ubuntu reconciliation food garden. I'm just going to share my screen. All right. So as I mentioned earlier, and Vish has also touched on, SAFSC and Copac have in the past developed a range of tools to assist people as they set up food gardens, food commons, and try and promote food sovereignty. This work started back in 2015, but we did manage to amplify it quite a bit last year. And given the constraints during COVID, we decided to host an online workshop series on how to set up your own food garden, and this was last year. And these workshops were really well attended, which really just showed the need and the desire for people to start setting up their own food gardens. So the first series was about setting up your food garden. And this included topics like setting up your household food garden and preparing the soil, also what to plant, indigenous knowledge seeds and the commons, and then maintaining your food garden. Then we had another series on looking at how we can close the loop in our food gardens, and that covered topics such as food, forest, and land management, water management, waste management, and composting, and then seed saving and reclaiming indigenous seed and food. After this, we also decided to develop a short animation to help people get started with their food gardens. So I'm actually going to play that animation now. And then after that, I'll take you through some of the content in each of the other two series. So I just need to stop sharing so I can share my sound. And then I'll play that video.
Food sovereignty. Let's feed ourselves. For a very long time, small-scale farmers around the world have been practicing what we now call agroecology. The term agroecology was initially defined and developed by Peruvian-born Dr. Miguel Altieri. His book, Agroecology, The Science of Sustainable Agriculture, was published in 1987. According to Dr. Altieri, agroecology aims to re-empower peasant farmers, who produce well over half of the world's food, using 25 to 30% of the agricultural land, 30% of the water, and 20% of fossil fuels used in agriculture, with almost no chemical inputs. How do they do it? Through polyculture, a complex ecological system of multicropping that has evolved organically over thousands of years. In parts of Asia, polyculture involves not only crops, but also includes insects, birds, worms, and fish. By comparison, monoculture-based agribusiness is wasteful, inefficient, poisonous, and destructive. Industrial monoculture is a major contributor to climate change and is also implicated in soil degradation, the destruction of ancestral farming systems, and the exploitation of farm workers. It's a political issue that affects us all. We urgently need to democratize the food system. Consumers are not helpless pawns on a chessboard. We must defend our right to make healthy, informed food choices. And small farmers around the world should have access to and more control over land, water, seeds, markets, and scientific and indigenous knowledge. The idea of food sovereignty lies behind regenerative agriculture, permaculture, agroecology, and holistic land management. All of these approaches work in harmony with nature. They build on local cultures, they promote justice for farm workers, they protect ecosystems, and they combat climate change by restoring soil and biodiversity. Meet South African agroecology and permaculture expert John Nzira. You can listen to him on Copac's agroecology workshop videos. For more info, go to sources at the end of this video. If you are thinking of starting your own agroecology garden, here are 10 basic principles that you should follow. Healthy soil has its own nutrients and natural systems to provide a good growing environment. Begin by observing and recording all of the features in your chosen garden site. Take note of how much sun, wind, and rain the site gets, and especially the quality of the soil. Good luck with your food garden project. But before we get back to work, let's just remind ourselves once more of the 10 basic principles of agroecology.
All right, so that was our short animation, just to highlight some of the principles and some of the steps involved in setting up your own food garden. We will share the link, and we've actually also translated into isiXhosa, so we will share both links in the chat. I'll do that once I'm done with my presentation. And then just to mention, I will share all the links that I talk about in this presentation. A lot of everything that we have produced is for free to download and to view. So please feel free to look at them and share these resources with your networks. So we don't have time to go through all of the content in each of the 8 workshops that I spoke about earlier, but I do just want to give you some indication of what you can expect to see if you do watch these videos. So each one is about an hour or just a bit longer than an hour, and about half of that is a presentation by John, and then sometimes a guest speaker, and then the other half is questions and answers from the audience. And so the topic for the first workshop that we did, as I said, was preparing the soil and setting up your household food garden. So I'm going to play this video for you. This is just some snippets of the first video. Just to get some idea of what you can expect from each video. Struggling to play. We'll get there now. There we go.
Within these systems and approaches, we have ethics that we follow. And these ethics are care of the people, care of the earth, and share with people the earth. When we say care of the people, it's all about decolonizing ourselves. By decolonizing is that we are not going to be colonized by the industrial agriculture systems, where we depend from them, from all agricultural inputs, from all the seeds that we use. It is all about taking responsibility of our families and the future generation. It is important that when we are working, planning to develop your garden, there are the considerations that we need to do. The first thing you need to do is to take a walk in the field. So what we talk about is we have land, like this example of a rural community in Limpopo. This is a household, and with this household, the land there is a desert. And how do you deal with this situation? The soil is sandy, as you see, and very poor. And in some areas you find sand very clay. In some area you find sand very much eroded. The topsoil is gone. It has been deposited to ocean. How can we then develop that? These are the steps that I'm going to show you today, that you can change any type of soil using permaculture systems. Any type of soil can be changed by simple methods, very simple methods. And the methods that I'm going to share with you are simple, and you can apply it anywhere. You can grow food anywhere you go, and as long you have soil, manure or compost, as long you have the containers or land or a place where you can have access to grow food. A ground cover, it's important, where all the time when you are dealing with the farming, you need to see that the ground is covered in 2 forms. In dry matter, like as you see in my garden, I'm sitting in my garden, we have the dry matter. This, here it is. That is covering all my garden. The soil, you can hardly see the soil because this is the blanket of the soil. And once you have this blanket, it means microorganisms are going to operate or work underneath, and they will help the soil to be rich. The other method we can do is to practice what we call the zero tillaging. And the zero tillaging or sheet mulching, it's a method that helps in improving the soil. For example, the sheet mulching, it's a method that is very easy. You can say, for example, you have grass, lots of grass in your garden. And when you have grass like this, you cut on the edge, and then you apply manure On top, you apply manure, and then you cover the manure with card boxes or newspaper. So you cover manure and you cover the grass with a newspaper, and make sure on the edge the grass is not growing. You put a boundary, and you sprinkle again. Can be animal manure or compost or earthworm farm, earthworm cast or earthworm compost. You put on top again to cover the card box. And after that, you put dry grass mulch to cover. And when you cover, like this, you put then water. You water to make sure that everything is decomposing. When it decomposes, then the grass that is below also dies. And then after some 2 weeks or so, or maybe a month, you come and drill a hole, and then you plant your crop in there. Then you can do pit beds. It's a pit bed. It can be smaller or large. For example, the big one that I can encourage people to do, it's 1 meter by 1 meter by 1 meter. The 1 meter, you use a spade to measure that. Then you dig another 1 meter down, and then you put layers of different organic matter. The hard organic matter at the bottom. For example, logs, twigs, it goes right at the bottom. Tins are good because they release iron into the soil. Then you put bones, they take time to decompose in the bottom layer. Then you put card boxes, you put compost, and then you start putting layers of compost and grass until to the top. And then you close and shape your bed. And then when you are done about shaping your bed, then you plant pumpkin. And pumpkin, they like that environment because you have deposited a bank, you have created a bank of nutrients where the pumpkin or any heavy feeder can send roots into that pit bed and continuously receive the nutrients that are required for the plant to grow. The other methods that we can do is to create crates like this one. Simple, it's 4 pieces of planks, and the size is determined by what you want to grow. It can be this size, 30 centimeter by 50 centimeters, and you put it right in the garden or closer to your house, and then you put manure or compost. Can be good soil that you can use, like this one, good soil, like this soil. You put it, and then in almost half full. After that, you sprinkle earthworms on top, and you cover with mulch. You cover with grass. Cover with the grass, and then it's ready for planting. The other method that you can do is this container where you look off planks, and you take planks like this and put a base, and you put a plastic inside so that it holds water and also it holds the soil. You put the same layer, you put rich soil here, either from compost or a good soil, or a mixture of 1:1, 1 compost, 1 soil, ordinary topsoil from your garden, and you put in layer. Do not make it full, make it 3/4 full, and then after that you sprinkle earthworms. After that you put a layer of grass on top, and then you wait for planting. This you can do it, and you can plant the same day, or you can plant after 2 days, just to wait the soil to settle a little bit. Okay, on this slide, we are explaining how you can prepare the soil from bad soil to the good soil. For example, you can see at the top on the left side, behind this lady who is measuring with a rake, this is how they have been planting vegetables. You can see that the spacing is too wide. The land is not covered. These guys have been using synthetic chemicals. The land was not designed properly. Water was running away from the area. So when we came to the place, to the project, we assist them in designing the land. And you can see that is in a contour line where we are catching water into that drain, ditch. And we are shaping and measuring our beds with 1.2 meter wide. And after 3 months, to your right, you see the garden looks wonderful. And the pathways is mulched. The garden now is intensively planted, and there is a lot of food in a small piece of land. So when you are deciding to prepare for this type of methods of preparing soil to grow your crops, you need to consider plants like heavy feeders, tomatoes, cabbages, spinach, pumpkins, butternut, potatoes, sweet potatoes, maize, mustard, kale, and others. These, they need food. They are heavy feeders. So it is good to plant them in a trench bed. So if you plant them in a trench bed, it helps them to get the food they want. Here we are saying for us to continue producing crops, health plants, like the plants you see in my garden, it is important that you promote ground cover all the time. Cover the ground. The ground should not be left naked. The ground should be covered with a blanket of grass, of mulch. So the answer to the future and future generation is to grow your plants in an organic way or in a natural way, using agroecological systems and principles that will help us to change our lives.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody, for following the discussion. Basically, from the questions that I have been gathering, some of the questions, and some of the questions have been answered as we go through. I want to start with the Kirsten's question about the plant that starts with a Dolichos lablab. I think somebody answered that. It's a bean that is indigenous to Africa. It is our African plant, but it has been pushed away from the systems, and we were educated to grow the other types of beans. So it is important that we bring this type of bean back, Dolichos lablab. It's indigenous to us, and we can grow it easily. It's a good ground cover and good food, good nitrogen fixing. You eat the leaves, the flower, you eat also the pod, and it's a multi-purpose plant. There is somebody who asked about a pit bed, if you can use it annually, or you continue growing, maintaining it. It is important that if you use tins and bones into the soil, it is not important to remove the manure from that type of pit bed. It is important just you continue adding organic matter, adding earthworms, adding all things that can decompose, and then you continue planting on the sides. And when you continue planting on the side, the plants send their roots into the pit bed, and then they survive easily on that. And the whole idea is to make a compost that you are not shifting. It's a permanent compost that is feeding the plants that are around.
All right, so you can see that the video that I just showed you, they aren't as polished as expert tutorials, but they do still contain a lot of expert content and practical tips that you would need to set up a food garden. And they're also very specific to South Africa. And then also just to note and to reiterate, the video that I just showed you, it's not the complete video. It's just to give you an idea of the content. And so it is just snippets of some of the topics covered. And also some of the more practical elements of the workshops. And then it ends off with an example of the question and answer session. So after each workshop, we had questions, people could ask any questions, and then John would respond. And some of these questions can still be informative to those who weren't in the workshop. So feel free to watch the question and answer session at the end of each video. And then, since we don't have time to go through all of the 8 videos, I'm just going to share with you some of the content in the remaining 7. So still looking at series 1, the second workshop, we had an introduction by me on what is food sovereignty, and then we had input by John on what to plant, including topics like growing food for nutrition and diet, when to plant crops, planting calendars, crop rotation, and then planting from seedlings or planting from seed in situ. And then the third workshop, we had some input by Method Nzira from Earthville Foundation on Indigenous knowledge. So each of these workshops contained a little bit of theory and then a little bit of practical, and we did try and make it interesting and bring in other speakers. And then we had input from John and Nzira on what Indigenous foods we can plant in our garden and how we can take care of them in the forest, veld, or fields. Also looking at the benefits of Indigenous plants, how to plant and maintain, and where to source seeds. And then we ended off with input by Vish on defending and reclaiming the commons through food sovereignty. And on the right here is just some examples of the slides in each of those workshops. The final workshop for the first series, we had an introduction to agroecology and why we need it in South Africa by Vanessa Black from BioWatch. And then we had input by John on maintaining your food garden through observation and record keeping, ensuring diversity for nutritional needs, crop rotation, identifying weak plants and feeding them, watering. And then looking at the second series, so here we decided to go a little bit deeper into how you can close the loop in your food garden. And that involved firstly setting up a food forest, so looking beyond just the regular crops. So here we looked at why we need a food forest, how to set up a food forest, classifying trees, factors to consider, benefits of guilds or microclimates, and then maintenance checklist. And this one was also about land. So this is the Land Justice Guide, which we produced, and Courtney Morgan just gave an introduction to that. As I said, I will share all the links to these resources, so you'll be able to read that and also watch more about it if you watch this video. Second workshop, we had input by John on water management, looking at water conservation, harvesting water, principles of effective water management. And then we had Ferial Adam give us an introduction to water sovereignty and the Water Sovereignty Activist Guide. And then the third workshop was on composting and zero waste. So here we looked at how we can compost to improve our soil fertility and the different methods of composting. And then we had some input from Simon Mbata from the South African Waste Pickers Association on what is zero waste and what it means for society. And then the final one looked at closing the loop. So here we had input from John Nzira on seed saving and Indigenous seed and food, looking at seed systems in the past, looking at how we can create resilient seed systems now, seed selection, seed storage, and seed banking. And then we had input from Zion Khan on reclaiming Indigenous food and seed in South Africa. And then a few other tools which Vish has also touched on. So these are some of the tools that we have been producing since early on. So the first one is quite a detailed activist guide on food sovereignty for the right to food. And this is also available online. I'll share the link. If you are interested more in food sovereignty, please have a look at this guide. It really is comprehensive, and it does teach you a lot about where food sovereignty comes from, why we need it, looking at power in the food system, and all of that. And then just to mention, these activist guides, they've been developed from the ground up, so with input from different organizations and communities and experts working in that specific field. But they're also tools for you to use to host workshops. So you can use this guide to, it gives you instructions on how you as a facilitator can host a workshop on this topic. We've also got our People's Food Sovereignty Act, which was also developed with input from people on the ground. And this really is about how a food sovereign system should look and all the different principles and laws and things that should be in place to ensure that we have food sovereignty. We have a seed saving guide on how you can save seeds and set up a seed bank or a community household or community seed bank. We have a water sovereignty guide, so they're just looking at water and how we can work together as communities to ensure that we have sufficient water, particularly to grow our food. And then a land justice guide, looking at the important aspect of land and how we can promote climate justice through land justice. And then the Climate Justice Charter, which is a charter of rights, which we have put together as a compass to guide us as we try and promote climate justice in South Africa. So those are some of the tools. And then finally, just to mention the Food Commons map, which we've also touched on, and we have shared the link in the chat. So we really want to encourage you to please, if you have a garden, if you set up a garden, please link your Food Commons project on this map. It's on the SAFSC website. And it's easy to add your Food Commons. So you just go there and you click on add your Food Commons project. You put in your details, you put in a picture, you locate yourself on the map, and then we will be able to be in touch with you, but also just to see what amazing examples there are out there. So I encourage you to go ahead and have a look at what's out there, what initiatives are close to you. And we really want to try and show that food sovereignty does exist and we can have an alternative food system in South Africa. And so please list your initiatives, and these can include whether it's a communal kitchen, a community garden, a home garden, a feeding scheme, a pavement garden, a school garden, a small-scale farm, or even a subsistence fisher organization. Please do list those initiatives. Okay, I'm going to stop sharing. And we have reached the next agenda item, which is when we introduce John, and then we have a Q&A. But I think before we go there, I'm just going to have a look at the chat. I see there's a lot of comments in the chat. So thank you everyone for all your comments and for all your inputs, for sharing what you're doing as well. This is really great. Just going right to the beginning. Okay, so we have some people who are trying to set up co-ops and food gardens. People asking for the links, which I will share shortly. Let's see. A lot of you already have gardens, so that's great. Please do list them. And then I just want to 1,000 Survival Projects by Rob, by Rotary Hillcrest in partnership with RC Winnipeg. That looks really great, Rob. We'll be in touch, and please be in touch with us. And then Vish has shared the Ubuntu petition again. Judy says rabbit urine is a fantastic foliar fertilizer and also works as an insecticide against some insect pests. Very interesting. Thanks, Judy. And then John has spelled the name of Dolichos Lablab. I'll copy that and just paste it to everyone, because I see it was only to the panelists. Okay, I think we're going to move on then. John, if you could turn on your camera and your mic. As I've said, John is our expert agroecologist. He's been very generous with his time in the past, and we're really excited to have him back with us today to answer any questions that anyone has. But I think we'll just start off with an introduction, John. So if you can just tell us a little bit more about yourself, some of the work that you've done, and then we will take some questions.
Okay, thank you, Jane. My name is John Nzira from Ukuvuna. We are based in Midrand. We have a learning center or a hub, agroecological hub or permaculture hub in Midrand. We are working in Limpopo mainly, but also we work with institutes like Copac, Wits. We work with SKI, Seed and Knowledge Initiative. We work with SAFSC. There are a number of organizations that we work with. We support them in establishing food gardens, helping to educate and transform communities. So our drive is basically on agroecology, permaculture, and regenerative systems, which drives us to provide answers against climate change, answers against hunger, against food security, and answers against peace in communities. Thank you.
Thank you so much, John. I'm just quickly, before I forget, I'm going to share those videos, the links that I said I would share. So that's the videos. And here are some of the other tools. Be sharing those. Okay, let's go back to the chat. So if you have any questions for John about setting up a garden, about some of the content that you already saw, even any questions for me or for Fish, please go ahead and write them in the chat. If you would like to speak your questions, you're welcome to raise your hand and then I can allow you to speak. We do still have quite a bit of time. So John, I'm just looking in the chat. So someone is asking, where can we get the seeds of the love beans? Maybe you can just share with us how people can go about accessing seeds, in particular indigenous plants. I see Kathy's also asked that question. So how do we go about looking for and obtaining indigenous seeds?
Yeah, since we are talking of sovereign, we need to look at our own indigenous seeds and how we can save them and share with others. Ukuvuna here in Midrand, we have a seed bank that we are developing and trying to get and grow quite a number of indigenous seeds or indigenous to Africa, seeds that are indigenous to Africa. We also have the communities in Limpopo whom we work with. They also have some seeds, and depends where you are coming from. In KwaZulu-Natal, BioWatch, we work with BioWatch. They also have some communities who are keeping a wide variety of seeds. So for Lab, we have bulk of Lab seeds here in Midrand. And during this discussion, I'll show you the type of seed we are talking about.
Okay, thank you, John. And then I see, just looking here. So Joanna had a question about assistance in understanding the preparation of soil. Joanna's next to Zakaria Park. She sells hot chili masala, which is selling good. However, some ingredients are very expensive and scarce. So this prompted her to start a small homegrown garden for garlic, salad, tomato, and chili. So Joanna, I would recommend that you watch the video. I have posted all the links on how to prepare your soil. But John, do you have any advice that you can give Joanna on how to prepare soil? I'm not sure where Zakaria Park is, John. I'm not sure if you know where that is. But particularly for growing garlic, tomato, and chili.
Yeah, okay. Garlic, tomato, and chili, they are almost all from different plant group. Garlic, it is easy, it doesn't need much nutrients compared to tomatoes and the chili. So the tomatoes, you need quite heavy manure or compost to feed this, that you feed the soil for growing tomatoes. In actual fact, what we do here, we make trench beds for growing tomatoes and feed the trench with lots of organic matter. Then the tomato can send its root there and can grow happily and produce good tomatoes. The same with chilies as well. But with garlic, we do mount soil like making a ridge on the and plant garlic without much nutrients or without even any compost, and then it grows easily.
Okay, great. Thank you, John. And then we've got a question from Judy. Firstly, she would love to order some love seeds, but then she has a question: can worm compost be used directly to grow plants, or must it be mixed with soil?
Okay, earthworms. Earthworm it can be used direct to water some plants that are mature. If you have seedlings, you need to mix 1:1, one plain water and one container for earthworm wheat, so that it cannot burn. Then you water only vegetable seedlings. About lab, I want to just show this is the container of lab, and we have lots of lab. It's a seed that is black with a white heart, but you eat everything from the plant, the seeds, and the leaves, and it is yeah, very nutritious plant. We have lots of plants here, lots of seeds here at Ubuntu.
Great. And then Mary Zimmerman says they have a small agricultural plot outside Montague, Western Cape. They're keen to involve the community, poor farm workers, and their children in the area in getting a little food forest set up there in the middle of peach orchards so that everyone can benefit from organic produce and learn how to help solve food security and quality problems. So she will appreciate advice and cooperation. And she's also got a lot of questions about how best to start. And this would probably require a site visit, looking at water and soil quality. It's also extremely hot in the summer. Don't want to use plastic shade netting. If no trees yet producing enough shade, is there an alternative? So Mary, just to answer your question about the site visit, I'm sure John could answer that question. I can't speak for him, but we are based in Joburg. John is based in Joburg. I'm sure he's willing to travel. But if you reach out to us, and I think Vish did send my contact, you would have my contacts from when you registered for this. Please reach out to us and we'll be able to try and link you up with some people in Cape Town. John might be willing to go down and do a site visit. But then John, also just a question about how to get some shade without using plastic shade netting, and if there aren't any trees available.
No, thank you. About assessment, definitely we can, any permaculturist knows that you cannot start a project without a proper assessment and document what's there, how effectively you can utilize the resources that are around in the area to produce the food, kind of food you require. And if there is no shade, depends what crop you are growing. It would be nice to start with pioneer plants. The pioneer plants, they grow fast and then they become shade of other species. Or you can use the grass. If there are grass, you can use grass to shade certain plants. So depends, all that can come after the assessment so that we can recommend what is required to develop your food garden. Yeah.
Okay, thanks, John. And then, yeah, so Mary, feel free to reach out to us and we can also put you in touch with John. We have a question about getting land. So getting land to start off is such a hindrance. How can one sidestep this hurdle? I guess it is tough to get land. John, do you have any suggestions about that?
To get land. It is there are if you are in an urban area, it's better to approach municipalities or to get people who have land but they are not utilizing it and probably hire it. If you like to purchase, then you need to go with the agencies in the area. If you are in rural areas, it is easy to approach the tribal authorities or have a friend with land and agree on using his or her land. But land issue, it's something that needs to be addressed within communities, because there are people who are willing to do something, to do farming, but they do not have access to land. And in my position, I wouldn't know how we can deal with that. It's more political. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, John. But I think you raised some important comments there about utilizing the land that is in the community. Maybe there are some people in your community who have a little bit of extra land, but then also looking for common spaces of land where you can perhaps work together with the rest of the community to set up a garden. We're going to take some hands. So I see Vish has raised his hand, and then we'll get Nonhlanhla to also comment. Go for it, Vish.
Yeah, Jane, I just want to add to what John said. I mean, we invited a lot of teachers and activists in communities to come to this workshop, primarily because schools are empowered, even by legislation and policy, to set up gardens. So it's important that activists start partnering with schools so that you can start using the school as a site of training, both for the students themselves, but also for community activists and households. One of the activists we wanted in this meeting today, but you couldn't make it, was Magda Campbell from Mitchell's Plain. Magda has been a teacher for many, many years in Mitchell's Plain at Beacon High School. And she started an agroecology garden in her school, and particularly for learners who were mentally challenged, Down's children and so on. But from there, the garden became a learning point for the neighborhood around the school. And eventually, it became the basis for food sovereignty pathways in many parts of Mitchell's Plain. Many schools started copying what Magda Campbell did. So I'm saying the school can be one crucial pivot for land and for starting such a process, including community clinics. And maybe in some places there's a fire station or other municipal offices, etc. You can start engaging them and building partnerships, particularly through local peace building and community-led reconciliation processes. Thank you.
Thanks for that, Vish. Great input. Okay, and then Nonhlanhla, I'm allowing you to speak, so you just have to unmute yourself and then you can ask your question.
Okay, thank you very much, Jane. Yes, good day to everybody. Thank you, Mr. John. I'm Nonhlanhla Mkhize. I come from Durban, Umgababa Rural. And I'm also very much interested in making a food forest. Actually, I've been trying, but you know, when you don't really know, because I've been watching videos on permaculture, I've got about 3 to 4 hectares in my yard. So, and I want my area or my home to be sort of a place where people can come and learn, because in our area, we do have a potential because it's a rural area and it's underachieved, and people do have some plots, but they resort to just planting things that are not going far, like spinach. But I want us to go back, because we've got a lot of indigenous food that exists that I've learned from the gogos that are going away now, that are passing on, because you come across a lot of imfino that we thought is just weed and it's got nutrition. So I want to start a food forest in my home that can also become a place where people can come and learn. Even the young people from the different schools that are around my area, they can come and learn, and we take it to the future and not lose the food that was given to us by Umdali, by the Almighty. Thank you. I don't know how you can assist, because I'm in Durban. Thank you.
John, would you like to respond?
Yes. Thank you very much, Nonhlanhla. How we can assist, I think you can communicate with Jane, and she will probably have some people in Devon, or if there are no people, then if I have time, I can come here and assist you. But basically what is required is a mean survey of what species can grow there, what species are useful, what species are medicinal, food, species that are of use, and see how we can bring these species back into the piece of land that we have, and design a system that now feeds itself and also feeding the communities within. And that unit can be a hub of indigenous species or a hub of indigenous plants that the people of your area can use, or they are interested in using them. So a basic survey should be carried out to check what species and what can grow in the area. And yes, that's basically what I think.
Thank you, John.
Thank you very much. Yes, Jane. No, just to say, there are a lot of medicinal plants as well, like your tassels that I've discovered. It's a lot, the plantainians, a lot of medicinal plants that exist in my area. And for me, it's like we've been weeding it out. It's time for us to preserve it because it's good for our people and it's good for our immune system. Thank you very much.
Great, thank you, Nonhlanhla. So there's some comments about just getting access to this information. So we do have an email list of everyone who has signed up. I will send the link to the recording, and then I'll send all of the links that we posted in the chat. And then you can reply to that email if you want some more information, or if you want to link up with John. That will be coming from either the SAFSC email address or my personal email address. So feel free to reach out to get more information after I share that with you. John, we have 2 questions about fencing. Some people have made some fences, homemade fences, but they aren't keeping goats and cows out. And these have been eating and trampling on some of the vegetables. What is a cost-effective way to make a fence? And then another question, what is a cost-effective way to create water irrigation?
Okay, about fencing, thank you. About fencing, indigenous fencing or live fencing, we promote what we call live fencing. It will take a bit longer to get established because live fencing, we use species like the Doviaris scafra, the acacia species, the Carissa angelis. We use even prickle pears. So those, they take at least 3-4 years to grow so that they can start repelling the livestock. But before you establish those live fence, you might use the cheaper barbed wire or the fence, normal fence, and then incorporate a buffer zone or live fence within the normal wire fence, so that when the fence is dying off, these indigenous species can take over, and then they become permanent fencing structure for your garden or for your environment. And the second question was about what
Yeah, cost-effective irrigation.
the cost-effective irrigation, it's drip irrigation. The drip irrigation is simpler because it goes within the pipe, water goes through the pipe and drips where the plant is. But most important thing that you need to consider is mulch. Once your garden is covered, it has live mulch or it has dead mulch, it means that less evaporation of water, and water is supposed to stay in the grass or in the dry matter, underneath the dry matter. So then if you are irrigating, drip irrigation will be the best. If you use mist irrigation or sprinkler irrigation or center pivot irrigation or flood irrigation, they can be applicable, but they use a lot of water and during the process of irrigating, some of the water evaporates, move out of the garden into atmosphere, and then it causes salts on the ground of the where your crops are, and then it can lead plants to die, or it can lead to accumulation of acids in the soil, and then some plants will die. Then you have a challenge. Thank you.
Thanks, John. And then we have a question: is lub also commonly known as SERM? S-E-R-M. Do you know, John?
I'm not sure if it is
Okay.
the other name. That is the other name. But the other name that I know is called hyacinth bean. Hyacinth bean. Yeah.
Hyacinth. Okay.
Yeah.
Thanks, John. And then some more questions about how do we order seeds. So John, maybe you just want to share your website address in the chat, so people can get your contacts as well. Let's see what else. Someone is asking, sorry?
Oh, I wanted just to share. I
Okay.
don't know whether people can see the lab seed, the way it is.
Yeah.
It's black and white stuff, white art. Okay.
Thanks, John. Is there a way I can get potatoes for production? What do you call potato seeds? What would you recommend there, John?
For potatoes, I'm not clear about the question.
How to get potatoes seedlings, but I guess it's just the little potatoes for planting.
Yeah, because you cannot get seedlings for potatoes. You hardly get seedlings for potatoes. But what you get is a potato seed. And the potato seed is a small potato that you collect from the soil and leave it on an open ground. And then it will start to shoot. And that's when it starts shooting, then you take it back into the soil. Then it gives you more potatoes.
Okay. So can one use any potato that you buy in the shops? Or where's the best place to source a good potato?
Yeah, you can use even potatoes that you buy from shop. When it starts shooting, it can start. I'm not sure whether potatoes are GMO, tempered with GMOs thing, but you can use the potato you buy from shop. You leave it on air on the ground, and then it can start shoot. Then you plant it. It gives you potatoes.
Okay. But I guess the best way would be to look around in your community for who is growing the indigenous potatoes or non-GM potatoes and ask them.
Yeah, correct. Because for here, in Tukuvuna, we have three types of potatoes. We have the red potato, the purple potato, and the white potato. All this, we keep our own seeds and we use them every year. We don't go buy from shops.
Okay, great. And then we've got a comment from Brita, who says, I'm a permaculturalist based in Johannesburg. Please contact me if you would like assistance. I'm also a fan of John and Nzira's work. And then Brita's number is there for anyone who'd like to get in touch. Winnie asks, does Ukubuna run workshops that we can attend?
Oh, yes, we have workshops. One, we have tours. If you want to come and see our garden, what we are doing, we have a 3-hour tour that starts looking at the seeds and the permaculture design. Then we also have 1-week workshop, and we have a certificate course on 2 weeks, a permaculture design course, where you attend the full pack of permaculture. That's what we offer. And we also offer a tailor-made training. If you need us to come to your community to facilitate, we agree on what you want to achieve. And then we guide you on number of days that we can do to address your needs. Thank you.
That's great. And then we just have a comment from Popsy. I think this is really great. I'm just about to use this Women's Month to start the food garden as part of a reconciliation program in our Phoenix community. We'll start small and roll out into the greater community. Today, I managed to get our school management on board, step 1. So that's really great, Popsy. Judy says, we will assist if we can. We are in the Midlands KZN. Thank you, Judy. And then Candace suggests to check out Go Green. They might be able to assist the Phoenix community. Douglas also says Ubuntu Citizen could assist. If I could ask, maybe I'll repost this, but if you are sending a message in the chat, please make sure you send it to everyone. Otherwise, just the panelists will be able to see. Here's another comment for you, Popsy. Okay, and then John has posted his details. I'll also just post that to everyone. We've got a question about costs of tailor-made training. I think you can just reach out to John and he can reply to you in an email. See what else. Judy is saying if anyone would like to try rabbit urine for worm casting, please contact her. She's put her details there. And then there is a comment here, Lub is also known as CERM. Thanks for that, Anita. Let's see what else. Okay, we have no more questions that I can see. If anyone would like to ask any final questions, please do write them in the chat. This is your last chance, or raise your hand and we will be able to answer them. Otherwise, I think we will wrap up. Just to reiterate, we have recorded this, so we will put it out as a resource on YouTube and you'll be able to view it. I will share that recording with you after this, and I will reshare all of the links that we've shared, including John's contact details, his website address and contact details. And if you have any more questions, you're welcome to reach out to me. Okay, no more questions. Wait, here's something. Andre is asking, can we partner from our school project? So that would be great. Please reach out to us. We will email you the recording. Yes, Candace. Okay, so it doesn't look like there's any more questions. John, I'm not sure if you would like to just have some final words before Vish does the closing, just to encourage people to start their Ubuntu reconciliation food gardens, because it is always sometimes it is a challenge, but maybe you can just advise on how we can get started.
Yeah, thank you. We had a wonderful team here, and starting a garden, starting a project for growing food is not very difficult. What you need is just few seeds, and then you make sure that you have the soil. You put the seed in the soil and put water. As long as the soil is covered, then the seed will germinate, and then take care of it. Because when you take care of a plant, you have to take care as like a baby. You have to love it. And as we are mature people, you know, as a mature, we can only know that we are mature because of the responsibilities that we take. If we have good responsibilities on land, then we can make a difference. Thank you.
That's great. Thank you, John. And just reminding me as well that it isn't actually that difficult to start a garden. You can just start small. You can start in a little pot. You don't need a lot of space. So we encourage you to go out and start your gardens. Start small, reach out to us for assistance. Reach out to those in the chat who have offered assistance. Okay, I'm going to now hand over to Vish just to give us a closing remark. Thanks, Vish.
So, comrades, this has been a very fruitful engagement, and I think there's a few important takeaways for all of us. Many comments alluded to resource constraints and so on. Now, in the context of what's happened in KZN and parts of Gauteng, the Solidarity Fund has pledged 400 million rands, mainly for food aid. The Human Rights Commission has also committed to coming to communities to inquire about the underlying causes of the violence. Our appeal in this meeting here today is that from this workshop, take this conversation into your communities, into your activist forums, into your local peace building processes, etc., and demand from the Human Rights Commission and demand from the Solidarity Fund that to renew nation building in South Africa, we have to meet the needs of the people. Hunger and the desperation that brings is one of the needs that has to be addressed immediately. It definitely was one of the factors or drivers of the violence we've seen in the country. And so get that message out there. Get the Solidarity Fund to understand it's not just handouts and aid. We need to move towards food sovereignty pathways, and it starts with the garden. I think the other very important point that came out in the conversation is that networking is very, very important, building on solidarity relations. And many of you have offered to give support, to give advice, to share your knowledge. Some of you are requesting support, Go Green, Ubuntu Citizen, Judy, many others have put their hands up, if you like, to play a part. So let's network, let's connect. People have shared their numbers. Let's link with them. John has shared his details as well. Let's keep on networking and sharing and building solidarity with each other. This is what's going to, if you like, ensure that Phoenix rises again. I think the other very important point is the tools we shared. And I think I want to underline this point that we want to move away actually from experts. That's why we developed the tools, whether it's the training guides, whether it's the animations, and whether it's the videos. This knowledge is now part of a knowledge commons. You don't have to go and pay for an expensive course. We've already paid, we've already secured all of that for you. It's here. Make use of it. So we've shared those links with you. Take that knowledge, run those videos and animations in your classrooms, in your community organizations, in your activist networks, etc., and get the work, actually a step-by-step guide to set up your garden. We go in depth, etc., but it's all there to get you going. I think the other very important point to make is that we want you to stay in touch with us. So there's the Commons map. So please log your garden there. And we will be linking with you out of this process. You have Jane's email, we have John, and we have a network of activists across the country. And so where we cannot get John or anyone else, we will get a local activist to link with you. There are activists in the Cape Province, in the Free State, in Gauteng, in KZN, in Limpopo, etc., all doing exciting things, and we can connect you up with them, okay? We are a movement about peer-to-peer learning, farmer-to-farmer learning, activist-to-activist learning. That's how we are doing what we are doing. So we are willing to make sure that that also sort of kicks into place for what you are doing. I think the other very, very important point is that we will email all of this, the recording, the link to all the training resources, the guides, etc. And Jane has said that, I'm just reiterating it. So you're going to get all of this information. So again, make this work for you. Make this event catalytic for what you are doing. That's very, very, very important. Again, we are not rolling in resources. The food sovereignty campaign doesn't have million rand budgets, far from it. We are based on activist commitment. So whatever we have, whatever limited resources we have, we are trying to contribute in a catalytic way. But we must all self-organize. We must self-lead. We must self-manage this process and get things going. The other point is that we shared with you a petition around Ubuntu and against race hatred. We'll be handing this petition to Parliament and the parties there, to the Human Rights Commission, to the Minister of Police, Becky Kele, in coming days. We've got close to 4,000 people signing up. It'll be great if you can help us boost that petition in the next few days. There are prominent South Africans that have signed it, many leading grassroots activists from across various communities, from all race groups, if you like, who are standing firm with us that we do need to defend on racialism and defend the values of our constitution and ensure we have deep transformation in our society. So please share that petition. Let's get it out there, and we'll keep you abreast with what happens when we write, even the EFF and others. And finally, just to say a big thank you to all of you for making the time, for coming with your own passion, your own commitment, and your interest to make all of these things. Thank you to John and Nzira, who's part of our larger family and network of food sovereignty and agroecology. And a big thank you to Jane Cherry and Copac and her for convening us and ensuring this platform happens today. Please stay safe, comrades, and let's advance Ubuntu reconciliation gardens in practice in our everyday lives.